Good evening. I am Barbara Walters. Tonight on 60 Minutes, we are having a 10th anniversary special of the execution of the notorious serial killer Ted Bundy. Tonight we will have a juror from the trial, Valerie Fuker. Good evening, Val.
Good evening, Barbara. Thanks for having me. I'm happy to be here.
So at the trial, you obviously had to pay very close attention to everything, and I'm sure that you learned a lot and maybe you researched more after the trial.
Of course.
So let's start from the beginning. What was his childhood like and all of that?
So Ted Bundy was born in November of 1946 at a home for unwed mothers.
So do we know who his father was at all?
So there is a theory that was brought up during the trial, and I also further researched that his grandfather could actually be his biological father.
Oh, interesting.
So basically, Ted Bundy's grandparents actually raised him as their own child. So Ted Bundy grew up believing that his mom was actually his sister. And this could be the beginning of his psychological issues.
And later we will have a forensic psychologist here to talk about all of the psychological issues, but I'm sure that had to do something to him.
Yes.
To kind of set him off.
Of course.
So were there any things that he did as a child that was just odd and out there?
Yes. So one instance, his aunt was asleep in her bed, and he came into the room and actually surrounded her with knives on the bed, and she woke up to him standing at the edge of the bed laughing. So this is a precursor for his serial killer problems.
Gotcha. So tell me about high school and college if you want, because a lot of serial killers actually don't go to college, and didn't he go to college?
Yes, so in the spring of 1965, Ted Bundy graduated from Woodrow Wilson High School in Tacoma, Washington.
Okay.
And then after that, he enrolled at the University of Puget, and then he left in the spring of 1966. Okay, and then Ted Bundy attended University of Washington from 1966 to 1969.
Okay.
So from 1967 to 1968, Ted Bundy begins dating a girl named Stephanie Brooks, and she closely resembles his victims.
Oh, really?
Yes, she had the long dark brown hair and dark eyes and a pale or medium skin tone.
Gotcha.
Yes, so then she broke off the relationship in 1968, and then he re-entered the University of Washington in 1969, and then graduated in 1973.
Okay.
Which is, interesting because most serial killers don't actually graduate college.
And that just goes to show his intellectual capabilities, because he had evaded police and escaped prisons many times. So I'm sure that just goes to show just how smart of a guy that police was dealing with at the time.
Yes, he is a very intelligent and charming man, which we will get into.
So what were his relationships like over his lifetime? Obviously he had a girlfriend, and did he ever get married or have any other girlfriends or relationships?
Sure, so after Stephanie Brooks, he started dating a woman named Liz Kendall, and that relationship did not last very long, but she was dating him for the first couple murders that he committed. And he did actually marry later in prison to a young woman, and they did have a kid together.
That's interesting. Who would want to marry someone like that is what I'm wondering here.
Yes, and I agree. She also must have had some serious psychological issues. And also his social life, he was very charming and actually quite a ladies' man. He was very attractive at the time, very funny, outgoing, which is unlike the typical stereotype of serial killers.
You know, being a loner, not wanting to be around society, just going out when they want to commit their crimes.
Right.
So obviously I'm sure part of Ted Bundy's act was that he was very charming to get these women to go somewhere with him, and I'm sure that's where he would then commit
Yes.
a murder. So So yeah, very interesting that he's charming. That is a trait of a sociopath, but I'm sure we'll get more into that later.
Yes.
So what was the nature of his crimes and how did they begin?
Sure. So Ted Bundy actually began his killing spree by preying on young college girls that fit the description of his first girlfriend who broke up with him.
Oh, gotcha. So I'm sure there was some anger there, and that's
Yeah.
what drew him to those girls.
Yes. So Ted Bundy would usually fake an injury, like his arm in a sling or a cast,
Okay.
and then ask young women to help him carry something to his car. And then once they were near his car, or even actually sometimes in his car, he would hit them over the head with a crowbar,
Oh wow.
so they would become unconscious. And then he would handcuff their hands and sometimes their feet as well.
Oh wow.
So Bundy's MO was raping and murdering women. He would do this by strangulation and mutilation.
Oh, okay.
And he would rape the victims before and after, making him a necrophiliac.
Oh, that's a little uncomfortable, a little gross.
Yes, very unsettling. And oftentimes he would actually cut off their heads and sleep with the heads or even the whole bodies until putrefaction made it unbearable.
Oh my gosh. So obviously he's got a very twisted mind. Maybe he thinks that they're still alive, possibly.
Possibly.
So how many victims did there end up being?
So, during his confession, Ted Bundy confessed to murdering 30 people, but the actual number of his victims still remains unknown.
Okay. So do people believe that it's probably higher than that? Like
Oh,
much higher?
it's much higher, I believe, in my research during and even after the trial. I definitely believe there's a lot more than 30.
I gotcha. Like so, just like random disappearances that did fit his MO. Like, is that just like part of the number that we think?
I think so, yes.
So what was this time span of all of these crimes? When did it begin?
So, his murders began right after he graduated from college. So his murders spanned from 1973 to 1978, and they spanned across 7 states, including Florida, Washington State, Colorado, Utah.
So how was he able to get so far from obviously Washington to Florida? How could he have not been caught or contained or something? Like, I feel like that's just such a long distance and so many murders. I feel like he definitely should have been caught.
Yes, and you're right. So he, as we discussed before, he's a very intelligent and charming man, and that actually helped him escape from prison many times. So he would be indicted for, one time it was just like a traffic violation, and then another time it was for driving a stolen car. And so he would be put in prison for those offenses, and then he would escape and flee to another state, only to murder more victims in that state.
So how was he finally caught? What finally brought him to the court system that he had a trial?
Right, so finally in February of 1980, he was found guilty of murdering a woman in Florida.
Okay.
And so he was found guilty of murder, and I was actually living in Florida at the time, so I was a part of this trial.
Okay.
And so yeah, we found him guilty, and he was sentenced to death.
So when was he executed?
So Ted Bundy was actually on death row for 6 years, and on July 2nd, 1986, he was supposed to be executed, but 15 minutes before his execution, he was actually given a stay of execution, which means his execution date would be postponed until November of 1986.
Why was he given a stay of execution? I feel like that would only be if they were trying to exonerate him, but obviously he wasn't. So why was he given a stay?
Right, so he was given a stay of execution because the day he was supposed to be executed for the first time, they actually started investigating the murder of two sorority sisters in a Chi Omega sorority. So they wanted to actually investigate his involvement in those murders.
Okay. Why was he given a stay of execution the second time?
So the second time he was given a stay of execution was actually just 7 hours before he was supposed to be executed. So they wanted to reevaluate his competence to stand trial and make sure that the final verdict was correct before his execution.
Okay. So tell me about when he actually was executed.
So they did find him competent to withstand trial, and the final verdict was correct. And he was executed on January 24th, 1989 in the electric chair.
Okay. And wasn't there like an interview or something like that? If I remember correctly, it was obviously a big thing in the news that
Right.
someone would want to do that.
So a few hours before he was executed, he gave a tell-all interview from prison, and he actually said that he blamed himself for the murders and also watching pornography.
Very interesting. Very interesting, disturbing. Kind of gives an explanation to why he's a necrophiliac.
Yes.
So thank you, Valerie, for talking with me and giving me all of this insight and details. It was very interesting to hear about. So thank you for joining me.
Well, thank you for having me, Barbara.
I am here with forensic psychologist Dr. Olivia White. She's here to talk to us about Ted Bundy's psychological issues. So, what started his issues? Obviously, there had to be a trigger, something that set him off. So, what was it?
Well, first, he didn't have a very trustworthy childhood. He some of these reasons could be because he found out that his mother wasn't actually his sister. Another thing was that he got addicted to pornography at a very, very young age.
Okay.
And then once he got older, he had a girlfriend, and his girlfriend broke up with him because she thought that he had no future. And with that, he became more addicted to pornography.
Okay.
He became more addicted to violent pornography, which triggered more and more violent thoughts.
Okay.
And soon, when he couldn't control his addiction, he had to change to more violent things.
Okay.
And instead of just watching other people commit these acts, he decided that he needed to do it himself so that he would be able to satisfy his addiction.
Okay. Understandable. So, what issue did he have? Like, what disorder do you believe that Ted Bundy had?
Well, I believe that he did not suffer from any other psychological issues except for being a high factor 1 psychopath, which means that he showed little signs of actually being a psychopath because of his intelligence.
Okay.
And so that made it hard, that makes it hard for us to analyze him.
Okay.
But to be a factor 1 psychopath. Okay, so it includes pathological lying, coining manipulation, and many other traits that wouldn't make him seem like a killer, but it could be.
Okay.
And then
So that manipulation that he had to do with the getting the women to help him and all that. So that all had to do a factor with the way that he would get these women to come with him and be in his car and all of that.
yeah, he was very sociable, and so that's how he could carry out his acts, and with his intelligence, he was able to get past so many things because he didn't show normal signs of a psychopath because he only had very little signs that were on the outside, and so he, with his diagnosis, he was not diagnosed with any other disorders because you can only have this one because other disorders could show in your outside appearance.
I gotcha. So tell me, how did the trial go?
So Bundy and his defense attorneys pled insanity because he, of course, was insane because of his nature of his crimes. However, he was then proven guilty and sentenced to jail because he did know exactly what he was doing and he knew right from wrong, but chose to do the wrong thing.
Okay, so because he knew what he was doing and it's not like this psychological problem distorted reality from him, right?
Yes, he knew exactly like how his reality was, and he didn't have anything that would like make it a problem.
Okay. So tell me, did Ted Bundy ever get treatment?
Not formally, but yes, he did receive treatment from multiple therapists and psychologists, and they did believe that he was mentally unstable and he didn't actually know what he was doing. However, I believe, along with the other jurors at the trial, that he did know exactly what he was doing, although very insane, but he was still capable of thinking.
Okay. Joining us again is Valerie Fuker. She's going to talk about the assault on Joni Lenz, who actually survived a Ted Bundy attack.
Yeah, so in doing some research after the case was conducted, I researched if there were any victims that escaped, and actually there is one woman named Joni Lenz, and basically she was renting a large house with a bunch of other girls, and her bedroom was in the basement. And so her friends were concerned when she didn't come up for breakfast in the morning, and so they searched the house for her, and they went into her bedroom to find her brutally assaulted. Her face and whole body was covered in blood, and she was actually unconscious, and so they called 911 for her, and she was in a coma. And so she doesn't really remember the assault at all, which is lucky for her, but she still has a lot of emotional and psychological issues.
Now we are joined by Joni Lenz and her emotional support dog, Berkeley, who has made herself at home. Alright, so tell us about your everyday life and what's been going on now.
Well, although I don't remember what actually happened, because it did, I'm like afraid to be by myself in Berkeley right now. And sorry. And like I'm afraid of men, especially if I'm by myself.
Okay.
So, your everyday life, what things go through your mind? Like, when you're out in public with Berkeley walking around, like, do you ever just, like, imagine that, like, it's gonna happen again and you get, like, nervous?
There's definitely like a fear that will never go away, so I prefer to just like be at home most of the time if I can.
Understandable.
Yeah. How did Berkeley help you cope with the stress you were under and like the anxiety that you felt around being outside?
Well, she's very protective of me, so like if I have her with me, I'm less afraid that anyone's gonna get to me.
Such a vicious dog.
I can just tell.
Yep.
So, this is Barbara Walters on 60 Minutes. Good night. From Joni Lenz, Dr. Olivia White, and Valerie Fuker. Thank you for joining us.
Good night.
Now I'm with Dr. Olivia White. She is a forensic psychologist, and she's that 10-year anniversary. Stop pulling out
She's
the dog's
literally
hair.
going bald.
What are you
Barbara.
Barbara.